Hi everybody, my name's Paul Tran from Indicia Training. Welcome to our video session on interview skills. This video is one of three that we've done for you. One of them is job search skills, which is a broad-based start to your job search. That's the one I'd recommend you take a look at first. We also have a video on CV skills where we look at how you can put your CV together to be in a situation now where you have an interview. What we're going to do today is take a look at how we prepare for an interview and some good structure around it, and how we look at our verbal and non-verbal behavior. So without further ado, let's look at our main objectives today. And there's three of them really. First one, really simple, best practice for preparation. Usually when people aren't confident in interviews, it's actually because they haven't prepared well enough. Second objective is we're going to look at some interview structures and principles. So we're going to take a look at a really good model for how we can frame our answers to questions. And we're also going to take a look at two types of interview that tend to be really popular these days. And we've got examples of questions that you might get asked, and we're going to help you think about how you might answer them. And then we're going to take a look at how we make a great impact. And that's going to be where we look at our verbal and non-verbal behaviors. So that's all your body language, the type of language that you use. So first thing to think about is something that I used to always tell people in my time working in recruitment, that you get an interview, you're a bit nervous. The one thing to remember is they want to interview you because they think you can do the job. If you've looked at our two other videos, we look in both of them at the importance of thinking about what your skills are, what your strengths are, and what your achievements are. Get them down on your CV, and that's what gets you the interview. So they want to see you because they think there's something there worth looking at. Now, you don't compete with people in the moment in the same room. But what we want to do today is get you thinking about how you can do an interview so well that you become the standard for everyone to compare with. So let's have a think again about our skills, our strengths, and our achievements. Skills, they're the abilities that we acquire over time, the stuff that we perform really, really well and really consistently. Our strengths are the characteristics and behavior traits like our honesty, our integrity, our diligence, our persuasiveness. They're the reasons why people like working with us. And of course, there are achievements, the tasks, the results that we've been particularly proud of, where we've made a difference to the employers that we've worked at before. Now, if you're just coming to this video without looking at the other two, what I'd like you to do is pause the recording and make a list of as many skills, strengths, and achievements that you have. If you've already done that, you know what we're talking about. We're going to move straight in to another way in which we can prepare ourselves. And that's to think about the questions that employers are broadly asking us. And there's three of them. The first one is, can you do the job? They're sitting in front of you and they're visualizing, can I see this person doing the job or not? The second question is, will you do the job? Will you get on with it? Will you have the right attitude and aptitude? Will you get on with everybody else? And of course, the third one is, will you fit in? Now, these days, what a lot of organizations do is they'll have a nice little grid with the job spec and person spec, and they'll rate people on whether they hit the right criteria. And often what happens is, if you've got 4 candidates that hit all that criteria, the will you fit in question is quite important, but it's also useful so they can gauge the level of self-awareness that you have about your strengths, your weaknesses, and how you get on with others. So what we're going to do is look at them in a little bit of detail. Can you do the job? Broadly speaking here, you may be asked about the when, the why, and the how of your career. What have you done? Why did you move when you moved? Why did you move from here to here? And what was it all based on? You may also be asked some situational questions. What would you do if a customer was swearing at you? What might you do if a member of your team was late every Monday for 4 weeks and it had a real bad impact on the team? You may be asked to do a test or a presentation. You may end up participating in a group discussion and an assessment centre where you get a task to do where 4 of you have to work together. Now, whatever we think of any of these 3 options here, the test, the presentation, or the discussion, what the company are doing is they're trying to replicate a work situation, and they're trying to see how you would get on with everybody. And that's very important to them. Will you do the job? Here, you might be asked what you know about us. Have you been willing to take the time to find out not just what we do, but what size we are, how long we've been going, where we're thinking of heading in the next year or 2, what's happened recently with the company? Always worth taking a look at the website. If they have company news, that's the up-to-date stuff that's going on. Quite good if you can throw a bit of that in the interview as well, just to show that you've made the efforts. How does this job fit in with your long-term plans? You may be asked this one. Where do you see yourself in 1, 2, 3+ years? What they're trying to do is work out your real motivation for coming for the interview today. Might be asked what attracts you to the job. And what they're trying to dig here is to find out how enthusiastic you really are about this one. You really want to think about this one, everybody. Not just the money, not just because it's a job. Why? It's the job that you're looking for. And only you know that. And also, they might ask you to describe a time where you felt really motivated, just to give you an idea of what you're really like. That's a strengths-based question, which we'll look at in more detail later on. And the third question is often they're trying to work out, will this person fit in? So they may ask you about you, what you enjoy doing, what you enjoy doing when you're not working and why, and give examples. They may ask you about your working styles, how you enjoy working, whether you like working on your own, whether you like working as part of a team, whether you like really complex tasks, whether you want more straightforward tasks or a mix. They may want to ask how you relate to others. It's quite important, this one. Sometimes we work with people that we don't have much in common with. We might not even like them very much. It's always useful to think about how you get the best out of a working relationship with people that you find it hard to relate to. They're bound to ask you how you work within a team. So there's team dynamics. What do you do? So think about that. When you meet 4 people for the first time and you have to work together, how do you go about that? What do you do to show understanding of everyone else, and what do you do about how you work and how you like to do a bit of that? And they may ask you about your strengths and weaknesses. They may talk about your development needs, what the nice way of calling it these days. It's really important to have a feel for what you're good at. Now, if you've looked at our other 2 videos, you'll have looked at the idea of strengths already. The interesting one with weaknesses is sometimes it's worth talking about a weakness that you used to have and how you overcame it, and then say, well, there's areas that I'd like to improve in. I think I'm still pretty good, but I'd really like to improve in this area and this area. What that shows is that you've got some self-awareness, but you also know a process that you have used to deal with a weakness you had before. So, can you do the job? Will you do the job? Will you fit in? That's part of your preparation, as well, of course, as thinking, well, they want me in for an interview because they think I can do the job. And this is how we start to build our confidence when it comes to an interview. And then, of course, we get there. And they start asking you about previous jobs, previous roles that you have, and you're thinking of describing your work in a very compelling way so that you come and look as good as possible. Remember 3 things. Most UK managers aren't trained in interview techniques. They are just asked to interview people. They may be just as nervous as you. They may be as equally skilled as you when it comes to interviews. And they want to see good candidates. This is an all-day process for some people. They take a day of their time to interview, not to mention the time that they've done already in selecting candidates for interview. They want good candidates. They want one person to be the one that they recruit. So it's worth bearing that in mind. It's also worth thinking about, how do I put together a way of describing how I've done achievements in each job that I've had. We've got a model for you here called the STAR model. Very, very simple. It talks about the situation, it talks about the task that you're given to do, it talks about the actions that you did to complete the task, and it talks about the results or results that you achieved. What we're going to do is go through each of the 4 steps. We've got an example for you as well, and then I'm going to invite you to take a look in your workbook or use some paper that you have with you and just work out as many examples of the STAR model as you can think of. And believe me, you will have done this time and time and time again in the world of work. So in action, this is how the STAR model works. The situation, what was the situation? And there may be some possible context, whether it's health and safety, legal, compliance, whatever the context is. The task or tasks, this is what you had to achieve. The action or actions, what did you have to do to achieve it, and describe that in great detail. And the results, what was the result? Now, you may have come across the TV program Dragon's Den. What I always find interesting about Dragon's Den is that the candidates will say, oh yeah, I've run businesses before. And the dragons will say, tell me about that last business. And they go through the situation. I invented a molding machine. It had to produce profitably. I researched it, I built it, and they'll say, what was the result? And they'll say, oh, well, it didn't really work and the business went bust within a year. And you see the dragons going, oh no, shaking their heads. Make the result positive. Talk about a situation, a task, and an action that led to a result that was positive, that worked. So here's an example for you. I was a customer service representative. My task was to pacify a customer who was complaining. My actions were that I listened, I showed understanding, and I gave a solution. And the result was a happy customer who bought more products. So here's what I'd like you to do. Take a look in your workbooks. You'll see a space which gives you the chance to think of as many examples of the STAR model as possible. There will be loads. You just have to get your head around using the model. If you haven't got a workbook with you, just use some paper and just think about as many situations, tasks, actions, and results that you achieved. You can actually do this for making a cup of tea, but we'll want to look for something a little bit more substantial than that. So give yourself 15 minutes, think of as many examples as you can, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, everybody, in the 15 minutes, I hope you've come up with as many examples as possible. Ideally, with the STAR model, what's really useful is you have 5, 6 examples ready for any interview, and that you're ready to just roll them out. Make sure that you roll out the most relevant ones to the job that you're going for. You'll be surprised how many you can think of. What we're going to do now is take a look at probably the 2 most popular types of interview that we see these days. We've got the competency-based interview and the strengths-based interview. Now, your workbooks have lots of detail on this and also loads of examples of questions. What we're going to do is just describe them, give you 1 or 2 examples of questions that you might get asked in these types of interview, and then get you thinking about how you can use that to prepare even more. So, competency-based interviews. This is where candidates are asked to show examples from their own experience of where they've demonstrated specific competencies or skill sets that are deemed relevant to the job. Tell me about a time when you dealt with somebody who was abusive. One example. Here's some examples here. Describe a situation in which you led a team. Give me an example of a time you handled conflict in the workplace. How do you maintain good working relationships? Tell me about a big decision you've made recently. How did you go about it? Just stop for a couple of minutes, pause the recording, have a think about how you might answer those 4 questions. How did you get on? Your workbook's got loads of examples. And if you want to dig deeper, you can go on the internet. There are loads of examples of these. Now, the idea here is that we get people talking about when they've done stuff well. Be ready for these. You're going to be asked some of these questions. What they want to do is get you talking about what you've put in your CV with more detail so they can visualize you doing the work that you did for someone else with them. That's competency-based questions. Now, these days, we're seeing a lot more strengths-based interviews. That's because, given what I've just told you, what often happens now is that people rehearse and practice competency-based interviews so well that it's almost like they're pressing play in a recording and just spilling out the message. So what people now sometimes do is take a look at strengths-based interviews. This is a little bit more personal. This is where the question tends to focus on what candidates enjoy doing rather than focusing on what they can do. It's based on positive psychology. It's when we talk about things that we really enjoy doing, we tend to say more, we get more animated, we get more interested, and we give away a little bit more of ourselves. And that really answers those questions. Can you do the job? Will you do the job? Will you fit in? Now, what we've got on the slide for you here are some examples. Do you prefer to start a task or finish a task? What do you do when you find a task boring? How do you stay motivated? How do you make sure you always do your best? What I'd like you to do now is just pause the recording for 5 minutes and just think about those 4 questions and come up with some answers for them. Welcome back. How did you get on? You know, if you take a look in your workbooks, there's loads of examples of strengths-based interview questions. And what we're trying to do here is really get you talking about yourself and talking about what you're good at. Just be careful that you don't slip into any weaknesses that you have. So be ready for strengths-based interview questions. You'll see a lot more of them these days. What you might find is some interviewers mix the 2 up. So be ready for both types. What we've got to do, though, is think about how we're going to respond. When I worked in recruitment, a lot of people said to me, you know, Paul, I don't really like interviews very much. I get put on the spot with all these questions and I never know what to say. And I used to just look them blankly in the eye and go, well, you know, if you think about the 5 questions you don't want to be asked, write them down and think about what your answers are going to be. Really, really simple way of doing stuff. If you prepare your response, you'll have an idea how to deal with most questions. Now, in your workbook, we've got a really good example. This is the example that's on the slide. Now, it's in your workbook as well. If you haven't got your workbooks with you, have a quick look at this one here. The possible question is, tell me about your communication skills. Fair enough. So, think about your skills and strengths. Give an example of when you've used effective communication skills. Okay, yeah, I've got loads of skills when it comes to communication skills. And yeah, my strengths are da, 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 da. Right, possible response. You identify a communication skill like customer service. You may describe an example where you listened, where you repeated the question back that the customer gave you, that you then referred back, you then gave a solution, you used very persuasive language, you checked if the customer understood, you checked if the customer was satisfied with your response, and that pacified the customer. They bought more products, and like we all do when we get a complaint and it's been handled really well, we tell all our friends how good they were. So it's really simple. You think about your skills and strengths, and you think about your response where you use those strengths. What I'd like you to do is take a look in your workbooks if you have them with you. And what we've got is a load of space where I want you to spend 15 minutes jotting down the questions that you don't want to be asked. And have a think about the skills and strengths you have around those questions, and think about a possible response, one that's really, really positive. Pause the recording, do your work. I'll see you in 15 minutes time. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you thought of loads of examples. Most people I've interviewed have said there's usually 5 or 6 questions I really do not want to be asked. Now, if you don't want to be asked them, there's a good chance that the interviewer will be thinking about those questions too. Prepare your response. Now, of course, we get to the end of it. You've answered all the questions really well, and they will say to you, Paul, what questions do you have? Let's prepare these as well. Prepare them in advance. Here are some questions that I'm going to have. Think about what you need to know. What will my first day look like? What will my first month look like? When will I first get the chance to do X? If I do this job really well in a year's time, what will I be likely to be doing? The last person that got this job, what are they doing now? Ask about things that show how keen you are. What am I going to learn? What new stuff are you doing? And talk about when you do stuff rather than if. Use your research and show what you've noticed. So talk about the stuff that they're about to get into that they've just put on their website. Talk about their strengths, where the examples that they will undoubtedly have on their website that says this is why people use us, and link your questions to that. And remember that we said earlier that interviewers aren't always really well trained or really competent. If you ask really good questions, that actually helps the interviewer explain the company a little bit more, maybe explain the role a little bit more too. So not only are you helping yourself, but you're also really helping the interviewer. So let's have a think about some general best practice around interviews. Remember that you're there because the employer is interested. And that's really important. No matter how nervous you are before or during the interview, have that one in mind, everybody. If you're doing a face-to-face interview, sit down when invited and where indicated. Do watch out for the old-fashioned employer who play that trick of having the chair the wrong way around or having it in the corner of the room. It's a bit old hat. You still might get someone that does that. Can I move the chair nearer to you, Paul? Thank you. Check your posture. This is important if we're doing online stuff as well, that we are looking at the camera, that we are in line with the camera. So if you have got a computer, make sure that it's at the same height as your eyes. Make sure that you're sitting up fairly straight. Make sure that you're relaxed too, and maintain good eye contact. Now, if you're face to face, every 4 seconds is a good length of time with eye contact. You will probably look down at your notes now and again. You may even look at something that you've prepared. You may look at your CV. If you're doing an online interview, again, make sure that you keep looking at the camera. If you have a panel interview and you've got it all on Zoom or Teams and there's a gallery, it's sometimes nice to look at the other people too, but most of the time, look at that camera. I mean, if you're watching the news on the TV, you wouldn't want them talking to you like this, would you? You'd want them looking at the camera. So maintain good eye contact. Use their name if you know it, but use it sparingly. There's nothing worse, Paul, is there, Paul, when people, Paul, use your name all the time, Paul? Use it now and again, Use it when you're trying to be particularly persuasive. My bank is particularly good at this. They tend to only use my name when I'm on the phone to them and we're doing a complicated transaction. They'll use my name at key points. I asked them about this. They told me that's what they do. It's really, really helpful and useful. Always listen really carefully to all questions and information. If you're not sure, ask. And sometimes you can reflect back and check that you've got your understanding right. That shows that you're listening. It shows that you're interested. Give clear, concise answers that stick to the point. If you're not sure, you can always ask, Paul, would you like a little bit more information there? And they'll either say, well, that's fine. You've given me everything I need to know. Or, yeah, a little bit more detail would be good on this area of that task. Stress your suitability with evidence. So if you've prepared right, if your CV is spot on, you can link what's in your CV to the job, as you already have done, and use the interview to give a little bit more evidence that you're the right person for the job. Ask the questions that you've prepared. If all your questions have been answered, say so. My little trick here is to say, well, you know, Paul, I was thinking about questions about salary and about the 3 sites that I'll be working on. And I had some questions about where the company's going in the next year. And I was also thinking about, when I do the job really well, where I would be in the company in a year's time. And you've actually answered them all. Thank you very much. So don't say you've answered them all. Talk about the ones that you've thought about. So at least there's a bit of a thought process going on there. And always thank them for the time. And always leave them with the thought that you're actually interested in the job in the first place. It doesn't have to be a sales job. Let them know that you're interested in getting to the next interview, or you're interested in finding out more. Ask them, but always thank them for the time. Their time's valuable as well. So there's some real good interview best practice tips there. Think about your skills, your strengths, and your achievements. Think about the STAR model: situation, task, actions, and results. Think about preparing your questions, and think about the best practice tips that we've just been looking at. Now, what we're going to look at now is how we make a really good impact. And we can start off with our non-verbal communication. Be yourself. You can't act for the whole of your life. Be yourself in the interview. If you're not quite a fit, you're not quite a fit. But there's no point in trying to be somebody else. Relax appropriately. You don't have to sit back like this. You can be relaxed and you can still look at the camera. You can still smile a bit. You can still laugh a bit. Keep it appropriate. Compose yourself and check your appearance before you go into the face-to-face meeting. Just see if there's a mirror around that you can just check yourself over. If you do something online, well, you're probably at home, so you should be able to make sure your clothes look like you want them to look. Make sure you're appropriately smart, depending on what's required. Check your appearance. Make sincere eye contact. This might be a bit much, but this is a lot better. And you might look down at your CV. You might look down at your notes. Sit up straight. It's quite useful if you're face-to-face that you keep your hands above the table. It just means that you're saying to the other person, I'm comfortable here. I feel quite safe. If you sit up straight, what happens is you can breathe better because everything sits nicely and everything sits in where it needs to be. You can express enthusiasm throughout your interview by nodding from time to time, by agreeing, by actually smiling. Sometimes it's useful to come a little bit closer to the camera and then make sure that you come back. Getting closer indicates some interest. And you can do all these things face to face, or if you're doing an interview on Zoom. Whatever you do, make sure that you stay in control of yourself. If we're too enthusiastic, if we're staring with eye contact too much, it can be really off-putting. So make it fun, smile a bit, laugh a bit, show that you have a sense of humor, but stay in control of that. If you're in control, your non-verbals are going to look great. Then, of course, we've got verbal communication too, and there's a nice sequence of steps that we've got here, that we articulate, we modulate, we pronounce, and we think about the speed that we use. So this is the point where we might get all the verbal stuff right, the non-verbal stuff, I mean, and then we get the verbal stuff right too. So what we're going to do is go through these 4 sections, and then I'm going to get you thinking about what you might need to do in order to articulate, modulate, pronounce, and use speed effectively next time you're in an interview. So, articulate. This is where you say every syllable of every word. And this helps us slow your voice down, and it ensures that you're easily understood. One of the things I like doing before I go into a meeting is think about some tongue twisters. If I can say them slowly and say every syllable of every word, I have to slow down. It's a really nice one. There's a chip shop in space that sells spaceship-shaped chips. If you can say that a little bit quicker, and say every syllable of every word, it doesn't matter what your accent is, it means you can be understood. And that's really important. It means you just say things once and once only. Where we modulate, that's where we ensure that the pitch of our voice changes in a controlled way. We might get more enthusiastic and things move quickly. We might slow down to explain a really important technical point. And if we change that, we keep the person's attention a lot more. And again, if we do it in a controlled way, it sounds really good. If you watch adverts on the TV or listen to them on the radio, you'll get this all the time. Pronounce is really important. Make sure you get their name right. Practice it. Ask them if you've got it right. If you use any technical words or phrases in terms of products or services, make sure you get those right too. It boosts your credibility. So if you have to, rehearse them. And the 4th point is speed. It's really good to speak in a calm, controlled, measured way. Think about BBC Radio 4. If you listen to the news on BBC Radio 4, it's very measured. It's a little bit slow, but it's really clear. We might speed up to show our enthusiasm, and then we may slow down to make a really important point. And the best way to think about this is make sure that we articulate, we modulate, and we pronounce, but we use our speed to keep things controlled and keep a level of interest up. So what I'd like you to do is have a think about this. I'd like you to spend 10 minutes having a good think about how you could articulate, how you could modulate, how you could get your pronunciation right, and how you can use your speed. Space in the workbook, or just use a bit of paper with you. I'll give you 10 minutes to have a think about that, and then we'll come back. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good think about that. What am I going to do to articulate more, modulate more, think about my pronunciation, and get my speed right? And what I'd like you to think about are your takeaways from today. What are the things that you're going to take and use? We've had a look at the importance of remembering that you've got an interview because they think you could do the job and you're worth meeting. They just want to know a little bit more. We need to relate our skills, our strengths, and our achievements so we can make a real good picture of what we've done well in the past. We need to really think about the STAR model: situation, task, actions, and results, so we can show how well we've achieved things in the past. We need to think about how we respond to the questions that we're asked. We need to think about competency-based questions and strengths-based questions. And we need to think about our non-verbal behavior and how we use our voice. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today. You can watch this recording again and again. Keep using your workbooks to get more ideas. And more importantly, best of luck in your interviews. The more you prepare, the more you practice, the more confident you're going to be. Best of luck with your interviews. I hope to see you again sometime, some of the videos that we do. Take care. Goodbye.